In a sport built on violence, precision, and strategy, almost no one rewrote the meaning of chaos the way Dustin Gaethje did. From the first moment he entered the UFC, fans felt something different: an electricity, a danger, a sense that they were watching a man who didn't just fight to win, but fought to break opponents in ways few dared to attempt. His nickname, the Highlight, wasn't a marketing gimmick, it was a warning. Every punch, every kick, every reckless exchange became a moment burned into the memory of anyone who watched him perform. His wars against fighters like Michael Johnson, Tony Ferguson, and Dustin Poirier weren't just fights, they were spectacles, redefining what brutality meant inside the octagon. But with brilliance came destruction. Gaethje's style, a mix of precision wrestling he rarely used and terrifying stand-up pressure he always used, made him unstoppable one night and vulnerable the next. He became both a fan favorite and an organizational dilemma. How do you protect a fighter who refuses to protect himself? And why did the UFC push him into some of the most dangerous matchups in lightweight history? There is also a quieter shadow behind his career. The controversies surrounding his coaching choices, the psychological toll of constant violence, and the long-running debate about whether Gaethje's style was sustainable or a countdown to disaster. The real question becomes impossible to ignore. How did a fighter this explosive become both the UFC's greatest weapon and its greatest risk? To find the answer, we must return to the beginning, back to the dusty wrestling rooms, where Dustin Gaethje first learned how to survive. Long before he became one of the most feared knockout artists in MMA, Dustin Gaethje grew up in the quiet, working-class town of Safford, Arizona, surrounded by copper mines, harsh summers, and a culture built on grit. His parents were blue-collar laborers, his father a copper miner, his mother a postmaster, and, from an early age, Gaethje understood the value of toughness, discipline, and the near-brutal work ethic expected of everyone in his community. Wrestling became his gateway out of the mines, a chance to escape a life already mapped out for so many around him. What began as a childhood outlet quickly grew into an obsession that shaped his future. At Safford High School, he became a local phenomenon, dominating opponents with a style built on relentless pressure and overwhelming pace. He refined that talent at the University of Northern Colorado, becoming a Division I All-American, earning recognition not just for winning, but for the violent intensity with which he competed. Coaches said there was something different about him even then, a refusal to slow down, a willingness to throw himself into the fire no matter the cost, and a mental ferocity that couldn't be taught. When Gaethje transitioned to MMA, that intensity didn't just translate, it exploded. Fans immediately saw a fighter who disregarded traditional caution, someone who didn't mind getting hit if it meant landing something harder in return. His rise in World Series of Fighting, WSOF, was meteoric. He went undefeated, captured the WSOF Lightweight Championship, and defended it 5 times, each fight adding to his reputation as the sport's most reliably chaotic showman. Analysts called him must-watch television. Promoters labeled him a goldmine, and future opponents quietly admitted that he terrified them. By the time he entered the UFC in 2017, Gaethje wasn't just another prospect, he was an event. His debut against Michael Johnson, a back-and-forth war that ended in a second-round knockout, instantly became one of the greatest debuts in UFC history. Every fight that followed only cemented the myth. Whether he won or lost, Gaethje produced violence that felt theatrical, emotional, and unforgettable. It wasn't just the damage he inflicted, it was the damage he absorbed without breaking. Fans began to believe he was built for something beyond championships. He was built for spectacle. But perfection comes with a price, and Gaethje's style, reckless, glorious, destructive, invited consequences that would ripple through every part of his career. Because as unstoppable as his rise seemed, it would soon crash into a darker truth. The chaos he brought into the cage didn't always stay there. The chaos that followed Dustin Gaethje throughout his rise was not the product of reckless behavior outside the cage, it was born entirely from the way he fought. No scandals involving arrests, failed tests, or backstage meltdowns ever defined him. Instead, his greatest controversy was the violence he willingly walked into and delivered every time he competed. By the time he entered the UFC, Gaethje had already earned the nickname the Highlight for a reason. Every fight looked like a car crash. Every victory carried a price, and every defeat raised uncomfortable questions about whether he could survive his own style long enough to reach the top. The debate became a scandal in itself. Analysts accused his coaches of neglect. Critics questioned his longevity, and medical experts openly worried about the accumulated damage he had taken before even hitting his prime. His first two UFC wars against Michael Johnson and Eddie Alvarez fueled that controversy further. They were instant classics, adrenaline-fueled spectacles that electrified the sport, but they also showed the darkest side of Gaethje's identity. He absorbed dozens of clean strikes in each fight, refusing to move backward, refusing to change who he was. Fans cheered, yet behind the cheers was a growing discomfort. How long could a man take this kind of punishment without breaking? The scandal wasn't about misconduct, it was about mortality. Gaethje was becoming too violent for his own good, and the UFC was both celebrating and exploiting that reality. The fight with Dustin Poirier intensified the narrative. With both fighters pushed to the brink of collapse, the bout became a 4-round symphony of destruction that ended with Gaethje collapsing against the cage. The image spread across social media, sparking debates about fighter safety and the UFC's responsibility to protect athletes from themselves. Why was Gaethje allowed to fight this way? Why wasn't anyone stepping in to force a change? Did the UFC secretly want him to remain reckless because it guaranteed unforgettable fights? These questions became part of his identity, and they followed him into every matchup. Even when Gaethje attempted to evolve under the guidance of Trevor Whitman, sharpening his defense and becoming a more calculated striker, critics argued it was too late, that the years of self-inflicted damage had already taken their toll. His war against Tony Ferguson at UFC 249 added another layer to the controversy. Gaethje won the interim title, dominated a legend, and delivered the cleanest performance of his career. But the unsettling part was the brutality of the victory. Ferguson absorbed dozens of blows before the ref intervened. Fans celebrated Gaethje's breakthrough, yet the discussion quickly shifted to fighter welfare again. Another Gaethje fight, another crisis of conscience. His title shot against Khabib Nurmagomedov added a different kind of controversy. For the first time, Gaethje looked human, overwhelmed by Khabib's pressure, and submitted in the second round. Critics questioned whether Gaethje's evolution was genuine or simply a temporary adjustment. The scandal here wasn't failure, it was exposure. The realization that his previous chaos may have masked deeper technical flaws. By the time he knocked out Dustin Poirier with a head kick at UFC 291, Gaethje had reinvented himself again. But the same question remained. Was he evolving, or simply delaying the inevitable consequences of the life he chose? These weren't scandals written in headlines, they were controversies carved directly into his body, shaping how fans, analysts, and even the UFC viewed him. And behind every war, every victory, and every scar was something even more powerful than danger. Money, the force that kept Gaethje indispensable, no matter how risky he became. Behind the chaos, violence, and highlight reel knockouts that define Justin Gaethje, there is a quieter force shaping his career, one that has nothing to do with heart, toughness, or his infamous willingness to walk through fire. That force is money. And in the UFC's business model, few fighters embody profit and risk the way Gaethje does. By the time he became an interim champion, Gaethje had already built an estimated net worth of $8 million. A remarkable figure considering the punishment he absorbed throughout his career. But that number tells only part of the story. Gaethje was not just paid to fight, he was paid because fans paid to watch him fight. A distinction that made him far more valuable to the UFC than traditional contenders. His breakthrough payday came during his war against Tony Ferguson, where insiders estimate he earned over $600,000, including bonuses. Then came bigger fights: Khabib, Charles Oliveira, Rafael Fiziev, Dustin Poirier. Two events that drew massive attention from fans hungry for violence only Gaethje could deliver. Each time he headlined or co-headlined, pay-per-view numbers jumped. UFC executives understood the pattern. If Gaethje was on the card, the audience would show up not just hoping for a finish, but expecting one. That expectation translated directly into financial leverage. Gaethje also built a significant profile outside the cage, though his lifestyle stayed relatively grounded compared to other stars. He secured endorsements from brands tied to athletic performance and recovery companies, drawn to his blue-collar appeal and the authenticity of a man who never pretended to be anything other than what he was. Fans didn't see a character, they saw a real fighter, someone whose day job happened to be surviving wars inside a cage. That relatability created a unique marketable identity, and the UFC capitalized on it. But the most powerful financial truth about Gaethje was this: he was one of the few fighters who could carry an entire card by himself. The reason? Violence sells. Gaethje delivered chaos with mathematical certainty. His fights never dragged, never bored, never left fans unsatisfied. Whether he won or lost, hardly mattered. People paid to see the destruction. That reliability turned him into a financial engine for the UFC, especially during periods when the lightweight division lacked star power. And because so few fighters could replicate what he offered, Gaethje became impossible to replace. The UFC could find new wrestlers, new kickboxers, new prospects with clean records, but they could not find another man who combined elite skill with an almost self-destructive willingness to absorb damage for entertainment. That trait made matchmakers treat him differently. He was given high-profile matchups, prime card placement, and opportunities reserved for fighters who drove revenue, not just those climbing the rankings. The irony was that Gaethje's value grew most during his losses. In the defeat against Khabib, fans praised his courage. In the fight with Dustin Poirier, experts called him the most exciting fighter alive. And with every war, the UFC saw dollar signs. This was the real power dynamic. Gaethje wasn't simply a contender. He was a commodity, one whose financial impact stretched far beyond purses and bonuses. His talent and his chaos created the narrative, but money kept him indispensable. And it was that economic reality, more than anything else, that shaped how the UFC handled him behind closed doors. Away from the roar of the crowd and the violence of the octagon, Justin Gaethje lives a life that is surprisingly quiet, private, and tightly controlled, almost the opposite of the reckless storm fans see on fight night. In Safford, Arizona, and later Colorado, he built a daily routine centered around discipline, repetition, and emotional restraint. While most fighters let fame shape their lifestyle, Gaethje remained unaffected by the spotlight. He avoided parties, kept his circle small, and stayed far from the chaos that consumed many UFC stars. But this stability was not just a lifestyle choice, it was armor, a way for him to manage the volatility that defined his fighting identity. To his teammates at Elevation Fight Team, Gaethje is known as one of the most polite and reserved men in the gym, a stark contrast to the wild, walk-forward brawler the world admires. His coaches often say that his secret is not aggression, but calculation. Yet outside the technical preparation, Gaethje carried burdens that few fans ever saw. His relationship with pressure, internal, cultural, psychological, was a constant battle. Born to a working-class family with Mexican and German roots, and raised near copper mines, where both his parents worked brutally demanding jobs, Gaethje grew up believing he had no right to complain about pain, fear, or exhaustion. That belief followed him into adulthood, molding him into a man who rarely expressed vulnerability, even when the weight of expectations became suffocating. Fame complicated this further, as his highlights went viral and his reputation as the most violent man in the UFC exploded. Gaethje struggled with the idea that fans celebrated the very thing that could destroy him. He once admitted that he did not want to be remembered for damage or brutality, but for the discipline behind it. Yet every time he stepped into the octagon, the world demanded the opposite. They wanted chaos. They wanted carnage. They wanted the version of Gaethje who fought as if consequences did not exist. Balancing who he was with what the public wanted became one of the quiet conflicts of his life. Despite his fame, Gaethje never adapted to the luxurious Hollywood lifestyle. He lived modestly, invested carefully, and kept his personal relationships away from cameras. But the loneliness of being a top contender still lingered. Training camps isolated him. Success alienated him. The constant threat of injury haunted him more than he let on. Gaethje has always known that his style, violent, forward, unforgiving, carries a price that may come years after retirement. This awareness made him more introspective than many assumed. Behind the stoic expression and the explosive knockouts was a man who constantly evaluated whether the pursuit of greatness was worth the long-term cost. And while Gaethje avoided scandals outside the cage, the internal tension between his controlled personal life and chaotic professional persona increasingly defined him. It shaped how he trained, how he fought, and how he viewed his future. The contradictions within him, quiet yet explosive, disciplined yet destructive, created a figure that no other fighter could replicate. But none of this fully explains why the UFC depends on him so heavily. To understand that, you have to look past his personal life and into the cold economic truth. The organization needs Dustin Gaethje in a way that goes far beyond rankings or belts. For all the chaos, violence, and unpredictability that define Dustin Gaethje, there is one truth the UFC has never dared to say out loud: they cannot afford to lose him. Gaethje is not just a fighter. He is the guarantee, the one man who delivers absolute war every single time he steps into the cage. In an era where champions negotiate, stars fight once a year, and hype often outweighs substance, Gaethje remains the antidote. He does not stall, he does not point fight, and he does not protect his record. He goes into the cage to destroy or be destroyed, and that makes him invaluable. Every event he headlines spikes in viewership because fans know one thing: when Dustin Gaethje is on the card, there will be violence, chaos, and a finish. No lightweight in modern history has produced a catalog of fights as consistently explosive. His battles with Michael Johnson, Eddie Alvarez, Dustin Poirier, Tony Ferguson, and Justin Fiziev created a reputation that transcended rankings. People didn't watch Gaethje to see whether he would win. They watched because they knew they would see something unforgettable. That unpredictability became a rare commodity, and the UFC knew it. Financially, Gaethje is one of the most reliable draws in the organization. His PPV numbers remain strong regardless of opponent, something only a handful of fighters can claim. He appeals to hardcore fans who crave technical violence, to casual fans who want knockouts, and to international audiences fascinated by his relentless pace. The UFC understands this better than anyone. Fighters who can generate excitement without needing controversy are irreplaceable. Most stars need scandals, social media wars, or marketing theatrics. Gaethje needs none of that. His fighting speaks louder than any promotion. But beyond money, there is something deeper, something the UFC cannot replicate. Gaethje gives identity to the lightweight division. When he fights, the weight class feels alive. When he is absent, the division loses a vital piece of its soul. Champions come and go, but fighters who define the emotional energy of a division are nearly impossible to replace. Gaethje represents danger, unpredictability, and raw courage, the exact qualities that built the UFC in the first place. And then there is the fear that haunts the organization. There is no second Dustin Gaethje. No one in the new generation fights like him, bleeds like him, or embraces risk the way he does. If he were to retire tomorrow, an entire era of the lightweight division would end instantly. The UFC would lose a guaranteed main event, a guaranteed fight of the night contender, and a guaranteed spike in global attention. So the real question becomes, does the UFC protect Dustin Gaethje because they value him, or because they fear a world where he no longer exists inside their cage? In the end, the story of Dustin Gaethje is not defined by titles or rankings, nor by the moments he fell short of championship gold. His legacy is carved into something deeper, something far more enduring. The way he transformed every fight he entered into an event, a spectacle, a memory etched into the collective consciousness of mixed martial arts fans around the world. He fought with a reckless courage that bordered on poetic, absorbing punishment few could withstand while delivering chaos that only he could control. His triumphs felt explosive, his defeats felt human, and his presence, win or lose, always mattered. Gaethje will be remembered as the fighter who refused to compromise his identity. Even when the sport demanded strategic caution, he was the man who walked into battles most would avoid, the man who elevated every opponent simply by sharing the cage with them, and the man whose name became synonymous with heart and unbreakable will. Yet the biggest question remains unanswered. Will he be remembered as a champion or something even greater? Because if legacy is measured not only by belts but by impact, then Gaethje stands among the few fighters whose influence transcends the scoreboard. And as his career continues to evolve, one truth lingers. The final chapter of Justin Gaethje's story has not been written, and when it arrives, it may change the course of lightweight history forever.